Do you know what the fastest growing city of the entire past decade was? I'll give you a hint. It tops most lists as the best city to live in the US and is also the capital of the second biggest state. That's right, I'm talking about Austin, Texas. The metro population here has increased by nearly 30% since 2010 to a total of 2.27 million, with around 988,000 residents living in the city limits. Austin's right here on a map and sits pristinely along the banks of the Colorado River near the center of the state. And no, not that Colorado River. Texas actually has its own Colorado River to thank for views like this and this. Yeah, if you thought Texas was just boring flat plains, swamps, and deserts, well, it definitely has a lot of those. But considering it's the second largest state, there's also so much gorgeous scenery, especially in hill country around Austin. But the beautiful nature isn't the only reason so many people are flocking to the live music capital of the world, where yes, there literally is live music everywhere, every night of the week. Aside from the fun hippie college town vibe, Austin is also home to one of the top 5 fastest growing economies, with so many huge tech companies moving here, creating a median household income of $77,000 and an unemployment rate of just 2.6%. Well, before the world started going down the drain, that is. And it's got pretty much everything you could ask for in a perfect city of its size. There's exceptional schools, amazing food, low crime, and nearly perfect weather 9 months of the year that never gets too cold. But you didn't click on this video to just hear the great things about Austin. In fact, you've probably only ever heard great things about the place. So if you're thinking of moving to the capital of the Lone Star State, these are my top 10 reasons not to move to Austin, Texas. Number 10. If you're from California. There's a saying here, don't California my Texas, which basically translates to, we hate Californians. But let's be honest, pretty much every state hates Californians, including California. But in my opinion, a lot of the stigma is pretty unfair. I mean, the people leaving California obviously don't like it either, so why would they want to bring it with them? After all, Austin's liberal enough as it is, regardless of any Californians. But Austin residents hate Californians anyway. Maybe it's because they see them all as these progressive social justice yuppies, or maybe it's because they drive up the price of real estate since they can buy 2 nice homes here for the same price of their shanty 2-bedroom house that's 20 miles outside of LA. Yeah, mostly the latter. But can you really blame Californians for wanting to leave their state and move to one of the best cities to live in the country when it's half the price of what they're used to? Who in their right mind wouldn't sign up for that deal? Either way, while 15% of newcomers to Texas are from California, only 6% of people moving to Austin are. So it's not really as big of a deal as the locals think. In fact, over half the people moving here are from other cities in Texas. Now, of course, this doesn't mean you can't move here if you're from California. Maybe just don't tell anyone where you're from. Number 9, no pro sports. Okay, now to be fair, Austin is slated to get an MLS soccer team for the 2021 season, which could be a step in the right direction. But as of right now, Austin is the largest city to not house at least one professional sports team in the NFL, NBA, MLB, or NHL. But what they do have is the 9th largest stadium in the world for their college football team. In fact, the University of Texas Longhorns actually generate over $200 million a year in sports revenue. That's more than any other college. Now, this one isn't really a con unless you're a major professional sports fan who also just so happens to hate college sports, but there's no pro sports pride here, even though this would be an amazing city for it. The residents are split between the San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston teams, with Austin still just being a really big college town at heart. Number 8. Extreme weather. Now, I said earlier that Austin never gets too cold, and it doesn't. Well, save for 1 or 2 cold fronts a year that can drop the temperature 50 plus degrees in a matter of hours. But these blue northers usually only last 2 or 3 days before it's back to a balmy 80 degrees in the dead of winter. Now, on the other hand, if you thought Austin didn't get hot, you've never been to Texas. While the weather's actually really nice here for 8 to 9 months a year, it'll be in the 90s pretty much every day from mid-May to mid-October, and over 100 degrees literally every day in August. And sure, the humidity isn't as bad as, say, Houston, where the air literally feels like a sauna, but it still gets really humid here. Make sure you've got a good deodorant, because you're gonna sweat a lot. And while the inferno known as August is a natural disaster on its own, Austin also gets hit by tornadoes, droughts, hailstorms, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, winter storms, and severe thunderstorms. Needless to say, Austin is not the place to be if you aren't a fan of unpredictable weather. Number 7. Allergies. If you time your vacations properly, you might be able to avoid the extreme heat. But what you won't be able to avoid are allergies because they're everywhere all the time. Sure, a lot of places claim the title of allergy capital of the world, but Austin is consistently rated among the top 5 worst cities for allergies. And it doesn't just have 1 or 2 seasons like most places. It really is all year. From the grasses that pollinate from March to September, to the ragweed in the fall and wintertime, to the living hell known as cedar fever from December to February when the pollen from ash juniper and mountain cedar trees makes over 50% of the residents suffer in snot-nosed, puffy-eyed misery, the pollen is inescapable. Cedar fever is actually unique to Central Texas and features the highest pollen counts of any plant in the world. Even people who have never suffered from allergies before can be debilitated to the point where they have to miss work or school. If you're sensitive to pollen and move to Austin, prepare to suffer. But hey, at least there's some of the best allergy doctors here. Number 6. Bugs. Allergies and extreme heat aren't the only pestilence you'll face when it comes to the environment in Austin. Oh no, because Austin couldn't just be a normal city with only 1 or 2 things that make life miserable. Maybe you've heard of all the bats hanging around the city, pun intended. But they aren't here just to make the Congress Avenue Bridge a tourist attraction. Those bats are actually an army mobilized against the common blood-sucking West Nile virus and Zika carrying downright no good, dirty enemy. An enemy so great that it shall not be named. For the smallest utterance of its name could summon its fiery rage from, okay, it's mosquitoes. There's a ton of them here, and they suck. Literally. And if that's not bad enough, they seem to be working in cahoots with other bugs too. And maybe even snakes, because there are also a lot of those here. You know the saying, "There's a snake in my boot." Well, where do you think that comes from? Toy Story? No. It comes from Texas. Don't quote me on that though. But what you can quote me on is that the warm, humid environment not only creates a breeding ground for mosquitoes, but also fire ants, giant trash goblin cockroaches, centipedes, salamanders, scorpions, spiders, termites, tarantula wasps, and locusts are a huge problem. Well, most of them actually aren't too huge, but there is strength in numbers. Number 5. You need a car. While Austin is one of the more walkable cities in Texas, that isn't really saying much. The live music capital of the world is a growing Sunbelt city, and like pretty much every Sunbelt city, they build out rather than up, so it's very spread out here. Like, very spread out. Now, there is a lot of construction going on with new high-rises and skyscrapers to make the downtown and college areas more urban and walkable, but that doesn't change the fact that the average neighborhood urban density has decreased by 5% since 2010. Basically, it's getting more and more suburban. The city limits actually span 320 square miles, and the entire metro area is 4,221 square miles and counting. Public transportation is also practically non-existent, other than a bus system that's more trouble than it's worth. So if you're not living downtown or near the university, you will need a car. And if that doesn't bother you, well, the drivers will. They're actually some of the worst in the nation. Now, to be fair, it might not be the native Austin residents, but whether it's the Californians or just people from other Texas cities, drivers here run red lights regularly, go way over the speed limit, and if they know what turn signals are, they sure don't act like it. Again, most people driving in Austin are not actually from Austin, but that doesn't change the fact that it was ranked as the 160th safest driving city out of the 200 largest cities. That's just not good. Number 4. Traffic. Bad drivers aren't even the worst of it when it comes to driving around Austin. Maybe it's because of the awful drivers, or maybe it's just the overall number of drivers, but either way, the traffic here is ranked as the 14th worst in the country. Sure, it's not that bad compared to big cities like Boston, LA, or New York, but the Austin Metro was not designed for 2.2 million people. At least the city knows this though, and is working on it. Literally. There's construction everywhere, and while it might help in the future to have wider roads with more lanes, right now, it's certainly not helping the flow of traffic. And by the time they finish the construction, there'll be even more people, so they'll have to start all over again. It's an endless cycle that's only gonna get worse. If you move here, bring snacks, because you can expect to spend an average of 70 hours a year sitting in traffic. Number 3. It's liberal. Austin consistently ranks as one of the most liberal cities in the country. Now, this isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it's something to be aware of if you decide to move to the otherwise red state of Texas. Austin's actually been ranked as the second best city to be a liberal in, behind only Seattle, which means it was ahead of cities like Portland, Denver, Boston, and dare I say, every city in California. Besides voting Democrat in 12 of the past 15 presidential elections, with over 66% of Travis County voting for Clinton in 2016, Austin's also a college town with a big hipster scene that might not be quite as weird as Portland's, but they're really trying to get it there. Heck, there's even a Voodoo Donuts here. Sure, there's some historic Old West architecture and amazing barbecue, but from the numerous amounts of vegetarian and vegan spots to the tech geeks to the biking, brewery, and coffee shop culture, Austin's kind of its own bubble that has a lot more in common with cities like Portland or Seattle than it does with its own state. Number 2. Taxes.
What do you mean, taxes? I thought Texas has no state income tax.
Well, yeah, there isn't any state income tax. Property taxes, on the other hand, are an entirely different story. But what'd you expect? The government has to get their money somehow. This might not have been the worst a few years ago when houses were still really cheap. But as I mentioned earlier, home values are going up fast, and that means property taxes are increasing like crazy. The effective real estate tax across Texas is 1.81%, and the median homeowner in Austin paid over $7,300 in property taxes last year. Number 1. It's expensive. You probably guessed this one, but Austin is no longer the cheap hippie town it once was. While the population has grown exceptionally fast, so has the cost of living. And yes, it is particularly due to so many Californians with much bigger incomes moving here. Back in 2011, the median home cost was only $224,000. Today, it's around $400,000, but homes near downtown or in the areas with good schools will cost you well over $700,000 or $800,000. Now, this isn't too bad considering the economy is booming and the median household income is $77,000, but the prices are only getting more expensive. Unfortunately, this means a lot of the people who originally made Austin what it is can no longer afford the expensive cost of living. This has led to many people leaving the city as well as an increase in homelessness. To be fair though, the city is trying to make affordable housing available and to have enough homeless shelters before it ends up like Seattle or LA. But hey, at least if you're homeless, you don't have to pay the property taxes. Now be sure to leave a like and subscribe and let me know what city you want me to cover next. Austin's honestly one of the best cities to live in the US, and I've seriously considered moving here many times. It's got so much fun and charm, and there's a reason it keeps making every top 10 list.